Hi there. We're going to be setting up a rapid Zap scheduler. The use case scenario for wanting to use this would be if you have Zaps that you need to run on a tighter schedule than the schedule trigger allows you in Zapier. So the kind of times we're talking about here are less than 1 hour. We can go right down to 1 minute. So if you have Zaps that you need to run every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, then this is a system that you could use. Why might you want a Zap to run this frequently? Well, if you are trying to poll APIs on a frequent basis, then this would be something that you could use. Okay, so this is the general setup. Okay, what we're going to set up are 2 Zaps that work in tandem, and what they're going to be doing is they're going to be triggering each other. In order for this to work, all the Zaps that we want to be triggered by this system will need to be triggered by a webhook trigger in Zapier. Okay, so actually every single Zap that's involved in this is triggered by a webhook, and therefore you're going to need to know how to set up a webhook anyway. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to make a new Zap here. This is just so you know what I mean by webhook trigger. Okay, so, I'm lucky, webhook is actually right there, so I'm going to click on that. Now this is a premium feature, but the only way you could set this up is if you were a premium user in Zapier anyway. So yeah, you need to be premium. Okay, so we've got webhooks by Zapier, and we're going to catch the raw hook. Okay, when we click continue, that is going to give us a URL. That is our webhook. Basically, whenever anything calls that URL, our Zap will be activated. Okay, now we're going to make use of that later on. But this is the process you'd go through to set up the webhook for all of your other Zaps that are going to be activated by this scheduler. Okay, so I'm going to click continue. Now I'm just going to show you one of the demo Zaps that I have actually set up already. So this has got the catch raw hook trigger here, and then it's just going to send me a push notification in pushover. Okay, so every time this Zap is done. But obviously, if you were using this, then you're going to have a more elaborate use case here. This is just for demo purposes. Okay, so back to this one. Right, we're going to need to test that trigger. Okay, I don't actually need to do anything to. I don't need to get this payload to work because I'm not going to be working with the payload. So I'm going to skip the test. I need to actually do the test trigger steps because otherwise later on it's going to be a problem. Now what we want to do is set up our spreadsheet. Okay, so go over here. This is the spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is going to serve as a database and a control center for all of the Zaps I want to be run on this tight schedule. Okay, so I'm going to have a couple of Zaps in here, demo Zap 1, demo Zap 2, and all I'm doing is giving it a name, a webhook, that's the URL that you just saw, and then down here I've got these checkboxes for active. So if it's ticked, then I want this Zap to be running on that schedule. And if that one is ticked, then I want that one to be running. But if I untick any, then I don't want it to be running. Okay, so basically that is all there is to setting up this database. Okay, we now need to go into the compiler, and over here is where the Zap that we are going to create is going to retrieve all of the webhooks from. Okay, so I've got 4 columns here. The hash is just so that I can indicate by the placement of the number 1 here that I want the Zap to retrieve the information along this row. That's purely for that purpose. Okay. Frequency in minutes. So this is where I specify how frequently I want this Zap scheduler to run. So I'm going to set that to 5 minutes. A delimiter. So this is the character that will go between the webhooks. So it's going to get all the webhooks and then it's going to join them into a single string, and this is the delimiter that it will use to go between those. So the reason I'm specifying here what the delimiter ought to be is so that when I put that into my Zap, the Zap knows exactly which delimiter I'm using. If I just did it arbitrarily, if I just encoded into my sheet, I'm going to use a pipe, and then over here on Zap I manually input a pipe as the delimiter, then if I change that for some reason later on, you could run into problems. So it makes it a bit more robust. Okay, so here we're going to put a formula in to join all of the webhooks together. There are two conditions that I want to include for whether a Zap webhook actually gets put in here. And that is, firstly, if there is actually a webhook present in this column here, and secondly, whether this is a true. You see, when I tick the checkbox, it's a true. If I untick it, it's a false. So if it's true, then include it. Okay, so let's paste in some webhooks here. These are my two example webhooks. One of them I showed you earlier. Okay, and we're going to tick both of these. Right, let's write this formula. So what we will do is we're going to first put this into an error handler. So if not available, it's just going to give us an empty cell. And then we're going to use the join formula. So the join formula will join an array into a string. So we first specify the delimiter. That's the delimiter that I was just discussing there. Now for the array, we are going to use a filter formula. Okay. So filter, we want to filter column B here. So this is our input column. We want only to include non-blanks. So again, I select column B, but this time now I'm going to add a condition to it that column B is not an empty cell, and then it will include it. Okay, so that's what that means. It's like less than and greater than empty. Handy shortcut that. Okay, and then column C needs to be true, so it equals, let me just type true there. Okay, we'll close that off. That's the end of the filter formula. That's going to return all of the webhooks where there is actually a webhook present in that column and where the active is ticked. And we close off the join formula. That's the whole join formula, and then we close off the if NA. So it's not a terribly long formula. And there's our two webhooks. Now if I go over here and uncheck this one, you should see we just got the first one there. Okay, and vice versa. Switching around. Okay, so that's all working great. So this is the bit, like I said, that Zapier is going to be referencing. So let's get this going into the Zap now. So let's switch back to Zapier. Right, so we've got a webhook trigger. Now we're going to use the Google Sheets lookup. So I need to select the action, which is lookup spreadsheet row. Okay, choose my account. Okay, good times. Right, now we can set up the action to get the information we want. So, spreadsheet, Zap Webhooks. Okay. The worksheet is the compiler. Let's go down here. Compiler. Lookup column. This is where we use that hash. And the lookup value, we input the number 1. Okay, so that tells us, that's going to tell the Zap, get the information from this row right here. Cool. Alright, so that is now set. So the spreadsheet gets the information. Okay, we can test and review. You should see that it gets information we want. Yep, there we go. So there's our frequency, there's the delimiter, there is the string of webhooks. You can see they had pipe delimited there. Cool. Alright, close that up. Next step, this is the cool bit. I'm going to use the code block by Zapier. Okay, so we want Python, run Python. Now we're going to set up the action. Okay, so we've looked up what we need in the spreadsheet. We're going to pass that into our code block here. We need 2 fields. Okay. So the first one we're going to call webhooks, and that is the string of webhooks from the Google Sheets option, or Zaps here. Okay, so that's those. And then second field is delimiter. And again, go in here and there we're going to select the delimiter. Alright, now we've got this bit of code here. We don't need that. Goodbye. Okay, now I'm going to bring up my code block here. Okay, so Rapid Zap Scheduler. We'll select all of this and paste it into the code block. Looks great. Okay, so I'm going to give you a summary of how this works. It's fantastic. Okay, we've got a stray thing that I'll need to fix, but anyway, that'll be fixed. So we import a module called requests. The request module is amazing, and you'll see why. Import type. Okay, I'll explain what that does. Right. So what we're going to do first is get those variables that we just input here. Okay, so they go into an object called, or a dictionary called input data. So I'm getting input data, get webhooks. So that gets those, and I call it the raw input string. And then delimiter, input data, get delimiter. Right, then what we do is to take this string here, right, and we split it by the delimiter. So now we have an array within our code. Alright, then I'm going to start a timer here, or I'm going to measure a number of seconds here. Okay, that's from the time module .perf counter. Right. Okay, so now I take my array and I start iterating through each webhook individually. Okay, and I do a little print statement here. So this, you can see this in the Zap, that it will say calling webhook. So it will put the URL of the webhook after this. This is a formatted string. Okay. Now the try except bit here, right? That's for handling errors. If there's an error calling a webhook, then it will do this instead, and it will tell us there's a webhook call failure. So because we'll see the URL just above, if there is a failure, we'll be able to marry up which one there was a failure with. So this is just to help you if you are facing issues. This can talk back to you so that you know where you stand with things. Okay, so this is the cool bit. We ping the webhook right here. Okay, so this is the request module up here. It's absolutely amazing that Zapier include this in code blocks. Okay, and then we call the post method. Okay, so we go post to the webhook, and we just pass in the URL from there. Okay, because that is the URL variable. And I print the response. Again, just helps us to check that everything was okay calling that webhook. Excellent. Right, down here we get the current time, and then we subtract the start time from the current, and it tells us how many seconds it took to execute this. Okay, that's within the loop. So it calls webhook 1, tells us how long it's taken to do that. Then it calls webhook 2, tells us how long it took to do that. Okay, so you'll see this all come out in the console at the end. And when it's finished doing that for loop here, which is that, just that bit there, you see the indentation. Now it's back to here, and we've got an end time, so it tells us the total time. Right, on the premium plan, which you need to be using anyway, you get 10 seconds of execution time. So these these timestamps here are useful for you knowing whether you're getting near to the limit. Okay, I've tested this with 20 webhooks and that was about 1.6 seconds. So you've got plenty of scope for pinging a vast array of zaps. Anyway, it's up to you if you can do that many. But right, click continue. All right, test and review. Let's see what happens here. Hope my code went in nicely. Oh yes, it did. Good times. Right, so it's calling first webhook. Gives me a response. 200 is good. All right, 400 is bad, or some 400 and something is bad. Right, so we've got a good call on the webhook here. I've probably got a notification. Yeah, good. Right, and then it took 0.11 seconds. Calls the next one, 0.19 seconds. There you go. It's going up, right? Yeah, that's what we want. So yeah, there we go. It's all good. The code works. Click close. We're done with that. Okay, so now the clever stage. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to add a delay in here. The built-in schedule trigger can go down to 1 hour, but the built-in delay action can go down to 1 minute. And then time delayed for. This is where we pass in that number from the spreadsheet. Frequency number, okay. Frequency in minutes, 5. And then we choose the unit for minutes here. So here we go. Click continue. Okay, test and review. Right, we're all good on that. Excellent. Right, so we've nearly got everything. It delays for 5 minutes, which is our frequency. And then what it does is it calls a webhook. Webhooks. So we start by catching a raw hook. Now what we're going to do is ping another one. So we're going to use post. Post action. Okay, click continue. Right, now we need a URL to go in here. We don't have that yet. Close that off. Right, I'm going to call this Zap Scheduler 1. Alright, so this will help you keep track. So this one, when it gets pinged, looks up the data from the spreadsheet, runs the code, pings all the webhooks that are linked to this system, waits for 5 minutes, and then it's going to ping Zap Scheduler 2. The obvious way to create Zap Scheduler 2 is, since it needs to be identical to this Zap, duplicate this Zap. But before we exit this Zap to duplicate it, we're going to copy the webhook that activates this Zap so that we can paste it into Zap Scheduler 2. And then once we've created that second Zap, we'll copy the webhook from there and paste it back in this one. And there's Zap Scheduler 1. Use the drop down menu, copy that. Okay, we'll get a copy appear here. There we are. Let's rename it Zap Scheduler 2. Right, so let's go into here. I'm going to paste in our webhook address into the final stage here, which is the post action down here. Right, you can see it's incomplete. In the URL field, just paste that webhook. Good times. Click continue. Okay, we can test and review, and it should come back saying, yeah, it found something there. Alright, so let's turn on the Zap. Alright. Now you'll notice what I'm going to do now is get this raw hook here, copy that. Right, we're going to go back into Zap Scheduler 1 in a moment, paste that into the post action there. So these post to each other after 5 minutes. Right, and you'll notice this is a really efficient number of steps because basically we can have a huge number of webhooks linked to this system in the code block. I don't know if you'd have that many, but yeah, you can run a vast number of Zaps off of this. But yeah, the number of tasks used are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really good, okay, because we've made efficient use of the code block. Right, let's go to Zap Scheduler 1 and edit that. Then go into here, edit, and we're going to paste in here. Oh, jumping around a bit, but we don't need any help, thank you. There we go. Okay, so these two are now intimately linked to each other. Test and review. Oh, good times, I'm getting my notifications come through, my pushover notifications. Turn this on, and that is running. Okay, so if I go back to the spreadsheet, this is now my control center for all the Zaps that I want run from here. I just set up a Zap, make sure the trigger is a webhook, paste the webhook in here, and I say, actually Zap, demo Zap 2, I don't want you running anymore, just untick that, and the system keeps going, keeps looping off itself, and will no longer include that webhook in the system. So yeah, that's how we can run Zaps on a tight schedule by the use of a code block. Code block is freely available. You can just get this and copy and paste it into your own setup. If you need any help, then of course we will help you, support you getting started with this and troubleshooting any issues you come into. That's all from us at Compound Digital Technologies. I hope you found this useful. Leave us a comment to let us know what you think of the system, and I hope it proves really useful for you.